Honor for me to be here. I've been around deer management for a while, and Missouri's kind of unique in that it's in the southeast group of deer management people as well as the Midwest, so I'm exposed to a lot of state agencies that deal with deer issues, and I've always considered Minnesota as one of the really good top deer management states. I also have to make a comment that I think Minnesota has always hired really good people. They're progressive, they're bright, and they really listen to what hunters say and try to get a gauge on what hunters think and what they want. There are a lot of state agencies that aren't like that, and so I think you should feel fortunate that it's that way. And Lou, you don't know how difficult it was for me to compliment you.
The check is in your thing.
I was asked to come and talk about an experimental antler restriction that we've had in Missouri for a few years. We did a little study, as well as talk about season time, and we're considering some peak season timing issues in Missouri. So I thought I'd present some information for what we've seen. I would caution you that this is Missouri data, and this is Missouri information, and what I say you have to take, and it's difficult because, as Willie said, every state's different landscape, different deer populations, different hunting strategies, and so what I present is Missouri specific, but hopefully it'll give you some idea of what we've experienced in Missouri. To give you a little background, Missouri's a diverse state. We have the northern part of Missouri is what we kind of call our agricultural area. It's not so much like southern Minnesota from the standpoint of row crop agriculture, but there's a lot of pasture, fairly low percentage forest, 15–20% forest. The southern part of the state is our Ozarks, and that's our most heavily forested part of the state. Tends to be poor soils, lower deer densities, and some of our poorest habitat, especially you get into the eastern Ozarks here. And then we have the boot heel, and we often say that we wish the boot heel had been cut off and given to Mississippi or something like that. Because from a wildlife standpoint, it's not real productive. Waterfowl maybe, but it's just intensive agriculture. Very little forest. The most common tree down there is a telephone pole. So it's just not real good deer habitat. We don't harvest a whole lot of deer down in that country. A little background on our seasons, like Willie, we have a variety of seasons. We have the archery and the urban and the November portion, which is our main deer killing portion, an antlerless, muzzleloader, and then some youth portions. All our permits in Missouri are sold over the counter. We don't have quotas as such. There are no county-specific permits, so a person buys a permit and they can use certain permits in counties, and I'll talk about this a little bit in a second. We have a 1 antler buck limit during our firearm season and 2 antler buck limit during our archery season, but the archers can only take one of those before our firearm season, and so it's essentially a 1 antler buck limit for archery too. The number of antlerless permits that we issue, a person can go to Walmart in Missouri and buy 100 firearms antlerless permits or 100 archery antlerless permits for $7 a piece. And they can use those in certain counties, and about northern two-thirds of the state. As you see around here, a person can use an unlimited number of firearms antlerless permits, as well as an unlimited number of archery antlerless permits. The yellow counties, they can use 1 firearms antlerless permit and an unlimited number of archery antlerless permits. And then that southeastern part, they can't use antlerless permits. They get 1 any deer permit, lets them take any sex or age of deer. So we have some diversity there, but we're pretty liberal in how we issue our permits and the opportunity for hunters to take antlerless deer. Our management goals recently have been to shift harvest pressure from bucks to does. Like so many other states, we would like to more balance our sex ratio and produce some more bucks in older age class. Stay engaged with our hunters. We're trying to listen to our hunters and do what, if possible, what our hunters are interested in. And then, of course, provide abundant hunting opportunity. We've been, as I mentioned, liberalizing, and you can see that in the early years or earlier years from the 80s and prior to that, we tended to shoot more antler bucks and does. Kind of went through a transition period where we liberalized and shot about the same number of antler bucks and does, and then more recently we're shooting more does than antler bucks, which is true, as you've heard this morning, in many states. kind of a comparison of Missouri and Minnesota. We're almost eerily similar. I look at Minnesota and their statistics, and they're very similar to what we have. We shoot about the same number of deer. We have about the same number of hunters. The hunter success rates have about the same number of deer. I think Lou said maybe 1.2 million, and we think we have like 1.4 million or something like that. But very, very, very similar states in terms of deer demographics and hunters and things like that. We also have probably similar deer management challenges. Our hunters are aging. We found that in the last 20 years, the average age of our firearms deer hunters has gone from 36 to 42. We also find that our older hunters kill fewer deer. And we projected, based on the age distribution in our hunters, that by the year 2030, we'll have about 100,000 fewer firearms deer hunters. We've had some discussions among ourselves, Willie and Lou and I, and we aren't in total agreement with that, and that estimate is based on a model, and sometimes the models aren't very accurate. But nevertheless, we have some concerns that in the future we're going to have fewer deer hunters, and individually they're going to kill fewer deer. And so we've been looking at ways of trying to shift some harvest pressure from bucks to does. We also see changing hunter interests. We see increasing support, and this is through survey data for adult buck management over the years. We also see hunters becoming more selective in what they shoot. And so we're not only looking at fewer deer hunters, but perhaps more selective deer hunters. With this in mind, in the winter of 2003-2004, we held a series of public meetings and presented some management options to people, how we might shift some harvest pressure from bucks to does. And not surprisingly, and kind of the same thing that's been seen in Minnesota, is that antler point restriction was probably the favored regulation compared to some of the other regulations. And so in 2004, we implemented a kind of a pilot 4-point antler restriction in 29 counties in northern and central Missouri. This restriction required that a buck have at least 4 points on one side to be a legal deer, and it was applied to all of our seasons with the exception of the youth season. And the youths could take any type of antlered buck. We did this in kind of a study fashion, in that we had the northern group of counties with the antler restriction, and this is again in our more agricultural area, about 18% forested, about a third in row crop agriculture, and then the rest in pasture. We also had a central group of counties with the antler restriction, and this was more Ozark fringe. Half forested, very little row crop agriculture, quite a bit of pasture. Deer densities in that northern group of counties tend to be some of the highest in the state. In that central group of counties, more moderate deer populations. So we wanted to have a high density and a moderate density counties under the antler restriction to see what effect it might have in those various, under those various conditions. We also maintain control counties, and we're similar in landscape for the northern group of counties as well as the central group of counties. We collected, the most important information we collected was basically age data. In 2004, Missouri went from mandatory in-person checking to mandatory telecheck. So we kind of had to shift the way we collected that information, but before doing that, we had determined that at meat processors, if you're looking at deer 1.5 years of age and older, the age distribution at meat processors was identical to that at check stations. So we felt we could collect that information at meat processors, and that's what we did. We basically hire students to go out, and some staff will go out too, and age the deer as a fawn 1.5-year-old or 2.5 years of age and older. And if it was an adult, then we pulled incisors for some annually aging, and that allowed us to get a more extended age information on the deer taken. We also collected antler measurements, but I'm not going to talk about that today.